Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our conversation with Rajna Swaminathan, who we spoke to in January 2024. I would love, if you're willing, for you to circle back and talk more about what it was like being in India, both the culture and the tradition that you were wanting to be a part of and decided to incorporate rather than being mainstream for yourself, and what led to that decision, and more about that, please.
Sure. I think it was just growing up and sort of realizing that, my interests were more in a kind of hybrid space, not only because I had been studying piano, but also I was just exposed to a lot of different kinds of music and had a curiosity about all of that. And I had been writing songs when I was a teenager, and like it was just very personal for me. But at some point I thought, well, I have these compositional ideas. I can do something with them, and I don't need it to be this like side project or,
Mm-hmm.
don't take seriously. I think I can take it seriously. And I think that, starting to work with folks in the jazz scene helped me come out of my shell a bit, and really see that as not just like, okay, I'm a classical mridangam artist who dabbles on the side with some crossover work, but rather really finding a home in the creative music scene um, in New York and seeing that as my primary sort of community, because I found that I could relate culturally and in terms of curiosity with these musicians that I was meeting in New York,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where the conversations could really be open. And it didn't have to be, well, how does this then fit into this traditional way of doing things? Um, but, and not to create like a dichotomy either. It's not that the Carnatic tradition is super traditional or anything. It's evolving in its own way, and it's people experiment there too, and it's just a different kind of experimentation. Um,
Yeah.
but I just found myself drawn to intercultural collaborations more and more, and
Mm-hmm.
found myself growing in those spaces and developing a kind of compositional voice that drew on many different forms of music.
Yeah. Yeah. Does one instrument or practice call to you more strongly, or is that fairly fluid?
I would just say it shifts. I think, professionally, I think I've centered the mridangam a lot, but as I go deeper into finding what I'm curious about, and which changes over time, I think there's different things that I end up practicing more. Like these days, I find myself really curious about the guitar, uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
composing on the guitar because it just offers a different perspective from the piano. Um, so it keeps shifting. I mean, I haven't really played guitar in a performance context yet, but who knows, maybe one day. But I think it's just constantly shifting. I think I do feel probably like the deepest anchor in the mridangam, but each instrument offers different kinds of expressivity.
Mm-hmm.
And over the pandemic, I actually wrote a piece where I play mridangam, piano, and sing sort of simultaneously, and that was also really fun to explore that, just mostly to juxtapose these different ways of expression and notice that my body responds differently to each one, and bringing them together creates an interesting kind of conversation, an embodied conversation, that causes you to contend with certain things are not in alignment quite, and other things work together quite well in unexpected ways. So I would like that to keep being fluid. I think maybe just, my relationship to the mridangam is unique. So it ends up getting centered in a lot of ways, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. So did you play all three, play for the voice, all three simultaneously, really simultaneously, or did you lay down each track?
Oh no, I did perform it. This was for the Bang on a Can marathon in
Mm,
2020, which was a virtual one. And they had sort of commissioned me to write a piece for myself. And I was in the mountains in Oregon, and like there was this beautiful chapel space with a piano in it, and I'd just really fallen in love with the piano. So I was like, well, I want to do something with this piano. And so then one day I just brought the mridangam and I was like, let me see how I would even do this. And I just started creating these sketches that, I mean, in some places, obviously, two instruments are a little bit more dominant than the third.
Yeah.
There's some places where it's more like, yeah, these smaller duos, but I
Even
tried
so.
as much as possible have them interlocked, so that I'm really actively playing all three, and dividing my attention in the way that I need to for that. So it was sort of it's I think there's a link of it on.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's
that'd be great.
yeah, I pretty much play, yeah, all three at once, which I haven't done so much of since then, but it did allow me to open up more to singing while playing the mridangam.
Hmm.
So I do that more now, in the music that I write. I allow more space for that to happen.
Interesting. Yeah, no, please do send me the link and we'll include it maybe in the show notes or in the publicity for the interview. That'd be great. And I'd love to hear it myself anyway. So thank you. Circling back a little bit, do you want to talk any about being in India or what that was like or
Right. Yeah. I'm realizing I'm skipping over some things.
eh, eh, eh.
Um, yeah, I mean, I was just really traveling there for about a month every 6 months or something. And there's this huge festival there in Chennai, which is sort of the hub of the Carnatic music scene. And I used to go there every year, for this December season, as they call it, which takes place in Chennai. And there's like hundreds of concerts going on in the city, at any given moment. And
Wow.
I could go and actually play 30 or 40 concerts in that month. And it was quite an intense experience because I had to take off time from school to do that.
Right.
And my parents would actually withdraw me from high school and then like re-enroll me when I got back because they didn't want the
Wow.
absences on their record. So um, that's what I did throughout high school. And I would take my homework and textbooks with me and kind of learn calculus by myself.
Wow.
So that part was quite intense. And it's like each instrument has a different pitch range, and you're playing with singers, um, with different kind of pitch, uh, sort of pitches that they use for the
Mm.
performances. And also the other thing is that you usually meet on stage. There's no rehearsal involved, so it was really quite a thrill to like go meet all these different musicians. Usually you just meet right before you go on stage, and then you play like a 2-hour concert together. And there's a lot of standard repertoire, so in that way, it shares kind of elements with jazz where, there's a known repertoire that you kind of go in, and there's conventions to playing that. But it really kind of gave me a lot of experience accompanying different people, just being able to improvise in different situations with people who have different kinds of time feel, and different approaches to the music. Some people are very like expressive, some people are very like rhythmically complex,
Mhm.
oriented, and just gave me just like quite a wide range of experiences playing on the mridangam, and that's sort of how you learn, and at that point, even like going to take lessons with my teacher, he was just like, well, at this point it's no longer about lessons, it's about you just performing and gaining experience that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it was just quite an intense experience, and not one that very like I could even really talk about to my friends because they would just be like, what are you talking about? You go there, you perform 30 or 40 concerts and you come back and you still get an A on your physics test or whatever. Um so it was just it was an intense few years for sure. And then, as I got into college, I was just thinking about, well, what do I really want to do, professionally, and does it make sense to keep going back? And so I kind of just took some distance from it.
Hmm.
And the other thing is that if you keep playing in a particular form, you develop habits, you develop a kind of autopilot
Yeah.
mode, which
Yeah.
actually so much of my curiosity was about undoing, and it was about almost unlearning the things that become automatic,
Hmm.
uh, so that I could create space for something different. So yeah, I think I'm always seeking a new kind of balance with it. I think for some time I spent a lot of time working with with dance companies and with Bharatanatyam dancers who were doing sort of contemporary work that drew on this tradition, but also was intercultural in many ways. So I've tried to keep a foot in that world, in whatever way that makes sense at the time. And and I do still play Carnatic concerts from time to time. It's just not my regular thing. But that stuff never leaves you. If you do those concerts, hundreds of concerts like that when you're young, it's just sort of embedded in you. And so if someone called me to play a Carnatic concert tomorrow, I could do it. It's just in me somewhere. But yeah, it was quite an immersive experience in that way.
I think immersive is probably the right word for it. And I imagine it really would have felt different. You'd have a different level of maturity going back because you'd been basically a professional performing musician. And then you'd go back to everybody worrying about mean girls, bullies, and grades and all the things that a 10th grader or 11th grader would worry as the prime thing. And so it must have been I don't want to use the word schizoid because that isn't quite right, but a bit of a bifurcated existence.
Definitely. Yeah, Anjana and I used to call it kind of like a double life.
Yeah. You'd
So
have to go into a different skin when you came back.
definitely, yeah, definitely a different like set of sort of language and customs and everything. It's different.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Rajna Swaminathan, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.